Hello everybody. Today I want to talk about potting up leggy peppers, how you can save them, and I'd also like to talk about working with clay soil. A lot of people seem to like to demonize clay soil, and I'm not quite sure why. There are challenges, but I would like to get to the bottom of that today and explain to you how you can make it work for you without spending a ton of money trying to fix it. Alright, so let's kick off with the peppers. Today's peppers are leggy because they were taller seedlings when put outside. They tipped over in the wind, and the sides of the fabric pots, they don't offer a lot of support. So once they tipped over, they started to grow upwards, which caused a curve in most of them. They're all distorted to some degree. And in addition to this, I was quite late with separating the seedlings into their own pots, which you can clearly tell. This only made the legginess worse because they were kind of fighting for light. However, with two small children and all the critters that you're hearing today, helping someone move, I also was prepping a bunch of clothes for consignment. So, of course, I've been quite busy. Things happen. So here we are today with leggy pepper seedlings, and I'm sure a lot of you mamas can agree it can be hard to get everything done, but we eventually get to it, don't we? You can also see that these plants are very healthy otherwise. They're just in need of a little help. If you look at the bottom portion of the stem, it might look a little funny, but that's actually normal. Those are little root nodes. They will produce roots once the plants are transplanted and I bury them deeper into the dirt. Those little nodes, they'll actually turn into roots. So that's completely harmless. It's not any kind of a disease. It's totally normal. Pepper seedlings are actually a lot like tomatoes. You can just kind of bury the stem and they'll root along the length of it. So if you have a pepper plant that's heavily damaged, or if you have one that's leggy and doing the same thing these ones are doing, don't throw it out. Don't throw it in your compost pile. Just bury it a little deeper. You'll save it and it'll be just fine. And on that note, I would like to say if you have a pepper plant that loses all of its leaves or something eats it all the way back, baby it, because it probably will come back. I've had pepper plants taken all the way down to the stem, just left a nub, and they still came back just fine. They actually came back quite bushy and lovely. I would definitely check out pruning, topping pepper plants to give you an idea of what that did to my plant. So all in all, that situation actually turned out quite well for the plant. It was a little bit later to fruit, but that was okay. Everything eventually works out. Now here in this video, you'll see the first thing I did was I actually separated the seedlings from the original pot. I ripped the pot open and pulled them all apart. The pepper seedlings are pretty hardy. They will tolerate a lot of handling. I can handle them quite roughly and I rarely lose a plant, so keep that in mind. If this video makes you a little uneasy by the way that I'm handling them, especially with seeing the severed roots, just know that they'll be perfectly fine, and yours will too. You don't have to take it easy with them. You don't have to move along slowly. So save some time and just kind of get it done. They're excellent plants for someone who is new to dividing seedlings, to get your feet wet and become familiar with root systems and untangling plants with entwined roots. Because not all plants take lightly to having their roots disturbed. So the more experience you have with separating roots, the better whenever it comes to more delicate plants. Once I have the seedlings separated, I want to move fairly quickly. I don't want to give the seedlings an opportunity to wilt. Therefore, the goal is to have them transplanted within 30 minutes. These took quite some time to transplant as the seedlings were leggy and needed some adjusting. So I had to kind of maneuver the seedling around the pot and get the dirt around the stems. Did you hear those beautiful geese as they flew by? Anyways, to start each pot, I put a little bit of soil in the bottom. I want to keep the lowest roots as deep as I can in order to accommodate the upper part of the stem. Once in, I manipulate the stem and plant in order to keep the top as straight as possible or to point it in that direction. It doesn't matter how much of the stem I bury or how crooked that section of the stem is. It's more important to have the stem that's above ground to be as straight as possible, with a bit of Packing, pushing, and pulling, the seedlings slowly take shape and are ready to continue growing until being placed in their permanent positions in the garden. So all in all, my goal is to just get them straight however I have to do it. As you can see at the end of the video, I mostly managed it. Not all of them agreed with me, but I did my best. So once I have them in their pots, they really just need a good soaking and some time to bask in the sun. They just need to get their new roots growing. They need to take hold and kind of start to grow in the direction that they need to. And after a week or two, they should do perfectly fine. There shouldn't be any concern there. Now, these peppers, I will not put them back out onto my porch for a day or two, because we had some cold weather move through. And I just want to note that anything below 40 isn't a good idea for your tomato or pepper seedlings. So while everybody thinks 32 is the danger zone, for tomatoes and peppers, if it's going to be below 40, bring them in. I'm a little bit more careful. If I see that it's going to dip to 43 and below, I generally bring them in just to prevent any cold damage, keep them from going dormant, anything like that. So if you know it's going below 40, bring your seedlings inside, cover your plants in the garden, because the smaller seedlings, they may suffer a lot of damage. It's also worth noting that while it may say it's 40 outside or 38 outside and you think your plants are safe, sometimes the forecast is going to be off by a few degrees because your plants are going to be on the ground for the most part if you've already got them in the garden. So let's say, for example, the forecast says 37 degrees and you're in the outskirts of town or you're a little bit further into a rural area. It's possible your forecast is already going to be a few degrees lower, and on top of that, the coldest air will be resting across the ground. So it could say 37, may actually be 34, 33. You could have a frost. It could kill your plants. So always be prepared to take action if you know the weather is going to be 40 or below. Now, with that being said, these guys have been camping out in my dining room. Not exactly the ideal place to keep them, but that's all right. Almost anything goes here. It can be a circus around here. The plants aren't the worst offenders. Now, our last frost date has actually come and gone, but of course, the weather around here is just kind of wild, and you just never know what it's going to do. Last year, we had a pretty hard freeze about 3 weeks after the frost date, so that was very unexpected, and all of my peppers lived through it thanks to many thrifted sheets from Goodwill. They all lived and they were all fine, but I am not making that mistake again, so I plan to plant them sometime in the coming days. I'm just waiting a few more days. I'm going to check the 7-day forecast, then I'll make a decision. Alright, now allow me to share a little bit of my garden wisdom. Let's talk about clay. Most of us have clay soil, unless you live near a coast or out in an arid area. You may have some sand. Here we have clay. Many of you can probably relate. Most of the YouTubers that you see will demonize clay to some extent. And while I can agree that it can be difficult to learn to work with, it is not impossible. It is not a bad soil type to have. And it can actually do wonderful things for your garden and your plants. So if you've been suffering, just know there is a way around it. No, you don't have to spend a ton of money on amendments, on sand, on gypsum, on lime, on garden soil, on compost. You don't have to do that. And I'm here to tell you how to use your garden soil without going broke. It's hard to penetrate. It's hard to work until people even think it's poor soil as far as nutrients go. And while that can be true of any soil, just because it's clay doesn't mean it's bad. You don't have to listen to the people that are telling you otherwise. You don't have to listen to the people that are telling you that you have to spend all kinds of money to ensure that your garden can nourish your plants. Once you learn how to work with it, clay can be a great friend to you. Now, some of the amendments that people suggest, such as sand, can actually make your problems much worse. The last thing you want to do is add a bunch of sand to clay. So if you've heard that one, let's steer clear of that. Now, I will say it's easier to tell people how to replace what they have to make it easier to work, but Many of us, considering the fact most of you are probably frugal, like I am, you may not be able to afford to replace what you already have. So why not learn how to work with the natural resources that are available to you and make things work for you? One of my favorite attributes of clay is water retention. Now, I don't water my garden the entire summer. If you had run-of-the-mill garden soil, it would not be a good idea. You would probably take out many of your plants doing something like that. But clay can hold water for a significant period of time. My plants can weather 30-day droughts in 90 to 100 degree heat as long as they are planted properly, which means not planting shallow. Now, I do begin watching for wilt at the 3-week mark just in case I may have a weak plant that's suffering, but generally this isn't the case. And I don't even water my seedlings in whenever I put them in the garden. From the beginning, my plant's roots are encouraged to reach deep, mining for water and nutrients as deeply as they can. I will also note that many times whenever I plant, I wait until right before several days of rainy weather. And I don't have to do this because, like I said, the clay retains quite a bit of water, so I can go either route, but I definitely try to strive for a rainy period after planting, not only to replenish the moisture in the soil after tilling, but to also give the plants a few days of cloudy weather so that the sun isn't stressing them out too much in their first few days. Alright, so let's get directly to our steps. Now, the first one is breaking ground. Now, it's true, clay is hard to work, but before you break the ground, you're going to want to mow directly before. The soil needs to be dry enough that it doesn't stick to your hand when you ball it up, so you don't want it muddy. But it doesn't need to be so dry that it's hard either. Now, what I mean by this is clay will crust over and it'll be hard to put a shovel into. So if it's hard to stick a shovel in the ground, you should probably wait until it rains a bit. Generally, this isn't an issue in the spring if you have adequate rainfall. Now, a good 3 or 4 sunny, warm days after a rain should work. Flooding rain, you may want to wait even longer. Now, after tilling, to minimize compaction, you don't want to walk on it afterwards. Remove as many of the large grass roots as you can while you're tilling to minimize compaction as well. You don't want to run back through your garden to pick out grass roots, so grab those as you go or have somebody following alongside you to pull them out. My second step is soil maintenance and post-tilling. Personally, I like to lay woven plastic mulch over the entire garden, not landscape fabric. Very different things. Landscape fabric absolutely sucks. I will say that. Now, woven plastic, it is a miracle worker. Now, whenever you lay down plastic, if you choose to do so, some of the sheets in my garden are designated walkways to avoid compaction. The stuff is about $60 for a 3x300 foot roll. It is so worth it to me. I otherwise spend like 2 hours a day weeding. So if I were being paid and I valued my time at a modest $10 an hour, that's $140 in labor in 1 week. Thus, 2 rolls of this plastic mulch pay for themselves quickly. Stakes are $20 for about 200, and all of it can be reused for multiple years. It's life-changing if you have very young children like I do. There are a few perks. Soil doesn't lose moisture like it would when exposed to the air. Worms come up to the surface underneath the plastic in droves, bringing in worm compost from the outskirts of the garden, and the plastic promotes airflow as evident by the plentiful life beneath it and no weeds. And now our next step, planting. As with any other garden, if you use the same plot, you will need additional nutrients for your plants. It's nothing special, nothing unusual. Clay isn't a miracle worker, as much as I wish it was. You're going to have to add some compost or something every year just to keep your plants healthy. So you're going to have to fertilize the plants to replace what you're taking from the soil year after year. At planting, I dig a hole just big enough to fit the root in diameter, but deep enough to bury the stem to an appropriate depth. Now, with that being said, you can also lay the plants kind of sideways. It's a great way to encourage root growth if you lay your peppers and your tomatoes kind of sideways when you plant them, and they will direct themselves straight upwards, so that's not a concern if they're laying sideways. Once I'm at the bottom of my planting hole, though, I will take my trowel and shove it downward into the soil 3 or 4 times, and that'll create little cracks in the bottom of the hole that'll promote drainage during flash flooding. It's also an opportunity for roots to grow downward more easily if they choose to as the plant matures. My garden is on a very slight slope, so that encourages gradual drainage, but in a flash flood, there's going to be standing water for a couple hours, so this significantly helps keep the plant roots a little bit more dry. Once the hole is prepped, I sprinkle a tablespoon or 2 of lime on the edges of the hole, and I kind of smear it around as if I'm dusting a pan with flour for baking. Then I grab my trowel I get a good scoop of black cow and I put it into the hole and I press it along the sides as well. So there I have my calcium and I have my nutrients. Calcium is obviously excellent for blossom end rot, and many times it's a water issue that causes blossom end rot, but I add a little bit of lime just to be safe. I don't amend the entire garden like that. I just put a little in the planting hole, so it's nothing wild. So once I have the black cow pressed along the sides, I put the plant in and I backfill with clay. I don't want to backfill with anything else. If you backfill with anything else, it'll become waterlogged. Clay will act like a bowl and hold a bunch of water. So try to backfill with as much clay as you possibly can to keep your plant's roots a little drier. Once you backfill, firm the plant in. Once you have the plant in and firm down, you can sprinkle a little fertilizer around 5 to 6 inches away from the plant, so that as the plant gets a little older, it'll have access to those nutrients as they've already penetrated the soil. As the rains come in, the fertilizer will be washed down into the soil, making it available to the plant's roots within time. If you're not using plastic mulch, I recommend keeping grass clippings on your garden. This will encourage natural decomposition and feeding by microbes, fungi, and insects. The soil will be cooler, it won't lose much moisture during heat waves or drought, and the insects will help to keep the soil fluffier and aerated. They'll actually be able to come to the surface of the soil instead of having to stay below the plant roots. Exposed clay will erode, compact itself during rain, and turn into a hard brick during the summer months, making it difficult to work if the weeds get out of control. Therefore, clippings are excellent for protection, and to boot, they're free. You're mowing your grass anyway, so just throw the clippings on the garden, and you don't have to worry about disposing of them. You don't have to worry about mulching them, composting them. They will literally just sit on your garden and act like mulch. Now, I don't recommend wood mulch, and the reason for that is you'll have a hard time pulling it off of the clay when it's time to turn the soil, and the decomposing wood will rob your soil of nitrogen. That's a very bad thing. It does look pretty. It is effective for controlling weeds, and it's great for soil preservation if you don't have heavy pressure from weeds like Johnson grass or Virginia creeper. These weeds, they laugh in the face of wood mulch anyway, so if you're dealing with them, just forget the mulch. Anyways, mulch is a lot of work. It's a lot of money just to implement and maintain it. Now, if you don't believe me, go ahead and search around for why we stopped Back to Eden gardening. You will find so many people talking about the troubles that they had with Back to Eden gardening and using wood chips. So I never did try Back to Eden here. I already knew that with the Johnson grass it wasn't going to work out. This stuff is absolutely insane to try to control, so I knew that wood chips would not work for it. And we're also under pressure from Virginia creeper and honeysuckle, so if I tried to do an established garden that I did not till, well, the Virginia creeper and the honeysuckle would take over very quickly because it would be undisturbed soil. Now for my annual flowers, I do use wood chip mulch. Of course, those are done by the end of the year, and it doesn't matter what I do with the mulch at that point. So it's much easier to use it for my annual beds. As long as you prevent compaction and you keep your soil covered, you won't have to till every year, especially if your weed pressure is kept under control. I feel it's vital for my garden to do it at least once during the initial establishment of a new plot. Hardpan is a very real threat, but I only till once per year. Eventually, I'm going to stop tilling, but right now, this is what's working for my family. The idea of a no-till garden is very exciting, and I can't wait to implement that. But right now, it's not too much of a possibility for me. Now, I have an incredibly healthy worm population in my garden due to the black plastic. So I tilled in a lot of old chicken and goat manure bedding from the winter. I actually had a big pile of it. I tilled it into the garden this year to feed them and attract more worms in, and I'd like to believe this act helps to reverse any potential hardpan I may have beginning to develop, and so far, so good. Worms will move through the soil. They will feed on all of this goat and chicken poop, all of this hay and straw, and they will make their way through any sections that may have compacted a bit, and they will help to break it up. Worms are such beautiful creatures. I absolutely love them, and I'm sure you do too. They are one of our greatest friends whenever it comes to dealing with clay soil and compaction issues. I want to thank you guys so much. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you for supporting my channel. And if you haven't subscribed, I would be very grateful if you did. If you enjoy my videos, of course, I wouldn't want to pester you if you did not enjoy them. But if this video has been helpful for you, it would be wonderful if you could like, share, and subscribe to my channel, because I've got all sorts of tricks up my sleeve that I plan to share with you guys. Have a great day.